This is Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Samoch Vav, and again, our mind and our thoughts are with Alchenu Kol Beis Yisrael as we dedicate our Torah learning as incredible schos for all of Klal Yisrael and Asurim Batzara Ubashivya and Mirza Hashem. Everyone should be safe, and this schos Torah should be megan. We're holding on Samachayim and Beis, about 14 lines from the bottom. The first word of the line is Kachayev La'achrini. We continue with Mar Zutra, V'Ravada Saba B'nei Diramori Bar Iser Polig Nichsayu Bahadi Adadi. They split up their possessions. Asli Kamei Ravashi Amrule, and they said to Ravashi, Al Bishnayim Eidim Yakum Davar, Al Bishnayim Eidim Amar Achmana. Says the Torah that via two witnesses it is the way Yakum Davar is established. And they wanted to know, how do you learn this pasuk? That what? If we want to renege, you would not be able to renege. Meaning, is the reason for Eidim that if subsequently one wants to back out, he cannot? Vanan. And we, loy hadri, we are not ever going to renege, and therefore we would not need to Eidim. Oidelma, or perhaps loy mikaimi milsa, or perhaps elo bisadi, or perhaps the Eidim are intrinsic, meaning what? That there is no na'amanis unless there are witnesses that saw what happened. That without the Eidim, the transaction is not effective. So they split up Polig Nechsayu, they split up a estate. So perhaps without the witnesses, there's a fundamental flaw in the division, in the transaction, and therefore it doesn't work. And of course, this is really coming on the heels of the previous discussion in which we had as to the status of two Eidim. Now we continue as to the status of those two Eidim in monetary matters. What is the function of the two Eidim? And Amr Lahu, Rav Ashi responds, Loi ivrasadi ella l'shakri. Witnesses are only there to prevent liars, as Rashi says, Shakri or kaifrim midvarim leimar loy kain hu. Baruch atah Adonai Elinu Machalam. And therefore, if you want to have a transaction without Eidim, you're allowed to. You just would have no protection from one who would later renege, one who would later claim that something else happened, etc. Amar Abaye, continues Abaye, getting back to an Eid Echad with regard to Nisuin. Amar lo Eid Echad echad achelev aloi shayisek. So we said an Eid Echad has an eman with regard to Nisuin. Asks the Gemara, if one Eid says that you ate chelev v'haloi shaisek, and the person is quiet, he doesn't say he did, doesn't say he didn't, neman, the Eid is believed. V'tana tuna, and a tana taught, amar lo yirechad achalta chelev, the one says lo yachalti potter. So the clear implication of this brisa is time, 5 lines from the bottom, damar lo. That's why he contradicts the Eid. But if he was quiet, meheman, then the Eid would have a credibility. So we see, he says, Abaya, that in Echad is Neman by Shari Surim. V'amar Abaya, and Abaya continues with another thing. Amr lo ya'ed Echad nitzmu ta'aroi secha. If an Echad says your tahar food became tamei, v'haloi sheisik, and he's quiet, Neman, the Eid is believed. Tanatun, and similarly we learn it. Echad aimer nitzmu, v'haloi aimer loi nitzmu, then pater. So again, the final last line of the Amid, the clear implication is what? Time of the Amar Lai. Because he contradicted the Eid, Mehem, and then the Eid would be believed. Ve'amar Abai, and the last line of Abai continues with the third din. Amar Lai Eid Echad Sharacha Nirva, that your ox was sodomized, meaning that someone performed an act of marital relations with the animal, the nafkamina being, now this shar is not allowed to be used as a karban, v'haloi shaisek, and the owner of the ox is quiet. Neman, the Eid Echad is believed. Tanatuna again, v'shene evda by aveira, v'shehemis al pi Eid Echad al pi abai lin Neman. If this Eid does that, and aveira was done, or that it killed al pi Eid Echad, Neman, hay al pi Eid Echad echadami. So in this brisa, what's the case in which there is an amanis of an eid echad? If the bailim admit and agree and concur with that which the eid said, that's the case of al bi bailim. Rather they were quiet, so we see that the eid echad has credibility. And the obvious question is, why do we need 3 cases showing that eid echad has a credibility with regard to shar isurim? And explains the Gemara 4 lines down, we need all 3 cases. If you only said the first case with regard to ini chaylev, I would think ilav de kimle benavshei da'avad chulin ba'azara lo avim ma'isa. If not that he knew that he actually ate the chaylev, he would never bring a carbon. But when the Eid testifies that your items became tamei, Meimer Amar, the owner might think, the owner might think that the reason why, we could say that you know why he was quiet? He was quiet not because he agrees to the aid. To suffer the chazi because he thinks, who cares? No. Let the aid say my items are tamei. And I'll use them when I'm tamei. What's the big nafkamina? But the fact that the owner was quiet does not necessarily corroborate the words of the aid. And if it would have only said, this second case of the food, I would want Misham to come afsalei b'mei tarasai, that there's a chiddush there that in b'mei tarasai the owner is losing out. Aval shayir nerve meima amar, maybe they know he's quiet. Kol hashvarim lavligam is be'ach kaimi, because the guy thinks, who cares? Not every animal am I going to use as a carbon. So who cares if this aid is testifying that it's possible a carbon? Sricha. And that's the reason why we need all 3 cases. And on the similar vein, Ibaya Luhu asks the Gemara about 13 lines down. The first one in line is Luhu. Ishtay azinsa be'ed echad. If someone gives testimony to a man that his wife was mizaneh, v'shoisik, and he's quiet mahu. Amar Abaye neman. Rava Amar einay neman. Why? Says Rava, the classical rule. Havi davar shabarba, havin davar shabarba, pachas mishnayim. Amar Abaye la, mina minala. Asks Abaya to Rava, you're saying it's a davar shabarba and therefore you need 2. Asks Abaya, where do we know? The opposite. Amar Abaya mina minala, where do I know that in echad is yes believed? Tahu samye tavim misader misnaisa. A blind man who used to be misader arranged, say over the mishnayis kamei demar Shmuel. Yom echad, one day nagale v'lavi kasi. One day what happened was he was late and he didn't come to the base of Medrash. Shadar shlicha basreis. We sent the shliach to find this blind man who used to say over the teachings in front of Shmuel. While the sheikh was going on the run road, he came on the other road. When the shliach came, Amar Ishta Zinsa. So of course the whole preface of the story was to get to this point, that when the shliach comes, the shliach went to the house, shliach saw this guy's not out here. Now he comes back and he says, your wife was mizana. So Mar Shmuel said, if you believe him, then go and divorce your wife. Topic. And if you don't believe him, then go divorce your wife. So Abaye, that's the case. Says Abaye, my love, what exactly was Mar Shmuel meaning? If you believe that he's not a gazlan, meaning if you believe that this guy is kosher le'idus, then we have the testimony of an eid echad that your wife was mizaneh, go and divorce him. Says Abaye, that's my raya, that an eid echad is believed. Rava, and what does Rava hold? No, you know what Mar Shmuel meant? Mar Shmuel meant that imehemen lach kibei trey. Then zilavka v'iloi tapka, and that's the reason why Rava disagrees, and Echad does not have the credibility. V'amer Abaye, and Abaye continues trying to prove that Echad is believed to say that one's wife is mezaneh. Mana amina la detanya, another braysa. Ma'isa b'yanei hamelech. There was a story with Yanei hamelech shahalach lekoichalis shevemidbar. He went to a place called Koichalis in the desert. V'kiveh sham Shishim Kracham, and he conquered 60 cities. And on his way back, Yanai was very happy V'kar l'chol chachmi Yisrael, he called all the chachamim, Amar lahem, avoyseinu ha'yoichlin meluchim, bezman she'yoiskim bebinyan beis ha'mikdash, av anu nechal meluchim zecher la'avoyseinu. So says Yanai, our forefathers ate meluchim while building the Binyan Beis HaMikdash. So too, let us eat meluchim, thinking of our forefathers. Basically, what he's trying to say is, we see that was a way of haidah, of saying thank you to Hashem. Let's do the same. V'helu meluchan al shulchanu shel zav. And Yanai serves meluchim on tables of gold. V'achlu, and all the chachamim ate. Vayisham echad, and there was a certain person there, ish leitz. He was a leitz, levra, with a bad heart, to b'li'al, and he didn't have any credibility. V'elazar ben Puriya shemai. Vayomer Elazar ben Puriya li'anei hamelech. So this guy Elazar ben Puriya says to Yanei hamelech, liban shal perushim alecha. The heart of the perushim are on you. That in reality, these chachamim said this, Rav Elazar ben Puriya to Yanai, the chachamim don't really like you. They're not really happy. Umay aseh. So Yanai says, really? What should I do to test them? So says this person to Yanai, hakum lahem motzitz shebeinei necha. You know you should do, make them rise by putting the tzitz between your eyes, and then they will listen, then they'll show whether they actually listen to you. Basically, by Yanai putting the tzitz on his head, says Rashi, he would cause the chachamim to stand up in front of the Shem Hashem that was on the tzitz. So hekim lam betzitz, shebein einav, so he puts on the tzitz Yanai, causing the chachamim to stand up. Hayasham zaken echad v'Yehuda ben Gudida. There was a zaken there, and his name was Yehuda ben Gudida Shemai. Vayomer Yehuda ben Gudida liyanai hamelech. Yanai hamelech. Rav lo cheser malchos. So he says to Yanai hamelech, be happy with the crown of kingship. Hanach keser kohuna. Leave the crown of kohuna, leave the tzitz, l'zaray shel Aaron. Why? The reason why the Chachamim were asking on Yanai's potential ability to be a king, because they said, Imoy nishbeis b'moydiyim. And this is, of course, the reason why this whole long story is being brought down over here. Because they said that Yanai's mother was captured in Moydiyim v'yevukesh hadavar, v'loy nimsa. And what happened? And they looked into it. They never found any evidence to substantiate that indeed his mother was captured. V'yibdu chachmi Yisrael bizam. So anyways, Yanai was angry with the Chachamim and he threw them out of the party. So now, after the Chacham opened their mouth to Yanai, Vayomer Elazar ben Puriya li Yanai HaMelech had Yisha Yisrael, Kachu dinoi, Vata Melech Kohen Gadol, Kechu dinach. A regular Jew, then it makes sense. But you're the king, you're the Melech. Kachu dinach, that's how you're going to respond. So Yanai says, what should I do? So says this guy to Yanai, if you listen to me, then roimsim, you should kill the chachamim as they acted dishonorably toward you. Says Yanai, 1 second. What's going to be with the Torah? So what's going to happen is, he responded, no, the Torah will be lying in the corner. Interrupts the Braisa and comments, at that moment, Apikarsis went into the mind of Yanai. Yanai should have said, oh, you're telling me to leave the Torah? That makes sense. But Yanai did not respond there. Continues the Braisa, Miyad v'tiktis aral yedei Elazar ben Puriya. The evil came forth via Elazar ben Puriya. V'yargu kol chachmei Yisrael rachman l'islam. V'ya'olam mishtoimei. And everyone, the world was lacking at Shabbat Shimon ben Shatach, the Hechser as a Torah liyashna, and the Torah, and he brought back the Torah. So what do we see from this whole story? We see from this whole story was that they suspected Yanai's mother being captured by Goyim, and even though they never found it to be true, still that was where the point of contention against Yanai was. So says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of the Amid, Heichi Dami. What exactly is going on over here? Elam would debate Trey. If you're going to say that there were 2 Eidim that said Amri Yishtabai, that Yanni's mother was captured, obey Trey. Amri and 2 Eidim said Lo Yishtabai, my Chazis Zamchazahani Zamchahani. What was all Shaila? Ela Beirechad. And now we know why we had to bring down this whole story. V'tayma to come Machshilu Beit Trey. It's only because they're being contradicted by 2 Eidim. That's why there wasn't an Emana. So Lavachi Mehemin, we would believe the Beirechad says Abaye. This is my raya. The Nerechad is believed to say that one's wife is mezaneh. The Rava responds, "Olam treu treu." Chtamar Ravacha by Rav min Yumi beidei hazama. Hachinami beidei hazama. The reason why they contradicted each other, and the reason is it was eidei hazama. They said imanu ayisem. You never were able to testify about such a story. That the reason why there was no Namanas was because the Yidin freed Yanai's mother, brought a Shivcha in her place, and therefore that's why the Eidim didn't have any credibility in such a case. So Abaya had his raya, Rava has his response. We continue with Amar Rava as we turn over to Samach Vavam Beis and says, Rava Manamin Allah, where do I know my din? Rava's din that what? And Nerechad is not belief. Titanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Amar Rav Shemin Ma'isa b'Megura shel diskim b'Yavneh. There was a story with a Megura, which Rashi says is Mayim, it's a swimming pool. Shel diskim, of diskim in the town of Yavneh. That what happened? There was a chazaka, there was a presumption that this pool was shalem, and you could use it as a mikvah. But then, whether do they measure it that it was lacking? So called Hayrish Hanasa al Gaba, anything that previously was put into this mikvah to make it tar, what happened? Rav Tarfin mitayr. Rav Tarfin said there was a chazaka, and therefore, even though right now we measure and it's lacking, but everything we could assume was tar. But Rav Akiva mitame. Amar Rav Tarfin mikvah zeba chazka shalimu I made. Why you Rav Akiva saying it's tameh? The chazaka was it was shalem. Misafik atabol chasroi al chasroi misafik. So says Rav Tarfin, there is a credibility. You don't cause a question due to a suffix. For everything that prior went into the mikvah is tar, and only obviously from this moment on, it would be presumed to be lacking. Amar Rav Akiva, says Rav Akiva, Adam zeh b'chazkes tameh yu'ami. No, a person has a chazaka that he is tameh. Misafik atabola taira. So if he goes into this mikvah, you're trying to create a cheskes taira. You can't do that. Misafik alta terenu. Misafik. That's the machlekes Rav Tarfin and Rav Akiva. Amar Rav Tarfin, says Rav Tarfin, let me prove my point. Someone who is standing and bringing a carbon on the mizbeach, and then at that moment it becomes known that this person is a ben gerusha ben chalutza, meaning he is not fit to be a kayin. Shavadasai kisheira. What is the halacha? The halacha is that which he performed prior. The avodah is kisheira. So it says Rav Tarfin, similarly in our case, that which went into the mikvah prior is going to be kasher. Amar Rav Akiva, no, I'll prove my point. So each Rav Tarfin and Rav Akiva has cases bolstering their points. Amar Rav Tarfin, he continues. You said it's comparable to the case of Baal Mum, which we say everything that prior went to the mikvah is no good. I say it's similar to Ben Gusha Bechalutza, therefore everything that prior was good. Near Lemi Daima, says Rav Tarfin, who is right? I Daima Ben Gusha Ben Chalutza, Ni Danik Ben Gusha Ben Chalutza. I Daima the Baal Mum, Ni Danu Baal Mum. So basically, Rav Tarfin is asking, how can we prove which is going to be which? Hischel Rav Akiva Laden. So Rav Akiva says, let me prove it to you. Mikvah b'sula b'yachid, or Baal Mum b'sula b'yachid. I'll tell you why it's more comparable. Because a mikvah is a psal that could be testified with one aid. And of course, this is why Rava brought down this whole case. Ubal Mum as well, psula b'yachid. Val yochech ben grusha bechalutza. Don't bring me a proof, says Rav Akiva, from ben grusha bechalutza shepsula b'shnayim, that there you need two eidim. Continues Rav Akiva, davar acher. Another point. Mikvah psula begufay. Mikvah is a psul in the item itself. Baal Mum psula begufay. And don't prove from Mengusha bechalusa shepsulai me'acherim. So says Rav Akiva, two reasons why the case of mikvah is more comparable to ben grusha or ben chalutza. Amar lei Rav Tarfon, after hearing Rav Akiva's responds and says, Akiva, kol ha'payrish mimcha, kepayrish min ha'chayim. Rav Tarfon basically folds and says, Akiva Nun, who separates from you, is like you separate from life itself. That's the end of the brisa. Now says Rava, Hi Baal Mum Shabsula b'yachad echi dami. What did we mean? What did Rabbi Akiva mean when he said that we have a Baal Mum? That is Psulai b'yachad. If the case is that someone contradicts this aid, does he have a credibility? Ela dishasik, and therefore the kavasek again gusha bechalutza dishasik, and yet vikotani mikva psula biyachid balmum psula biyachid vayachir ben gusha bechalutza shepsulai bishnayim, says Rava. So proves Rava that there will not be a credibility to an eid echad when it comes to gusha bechalutza, which of course is the case of a woman being mizana, which would create the situation ben grusha ben chalutza. No, really, it's that there is someone contradicting. Why would he believe the Amar Lei? The reason is the Amar Lei, because the aid says to the Kohen Shalach Achoi, Shalach Achvei, because he could say, prove it. You're saying you don't have a mom, that something could be proven, and that's the reason why the counter to the aid has more credibility. And this is what the Tana meant when it said mikvah psula begufa, balma psula begufai. So that's the reason, because it's psul be'etzim in the body, meaning it could be proved by taking off his clothing and see whether he indeed has a mum or not. We conclude, as the Gemara just proved some of these sidebar dinim, where do we know Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza, the avoid that they did prior is kosher? Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, the Amar Akra says the pasuk vasla zara acharav ben zara kosher ubein zara apostle, says to you yizara acharav, and we learn out any zara whether it's kosher or apostle. Avud Shmuel Amar mehacha baruch Hashem chelai upal yadav tirtza. Says the pasuk, you should be baruch, you should give bracha Hashem chelai, his belongings Hashem upal yadav tirtza, and the pulais and the deeds of his hands, his karbanais tirtza, you should accept. Afilu chulin shabai tirtza, even the chulin you should accept. Rav Yanai Amar me'acha basal hakoyin sheyeh b'yam mahem v'chisal adaydach shadam ha'ilechitz hakoyin sheyeh b'yam. What does that mean? Elazeh kosher v'nischalel balmum avodas. Elazeh kosher v'nischalel, still his avodah is going to be kosher. Balmum davadas psula, says the Gemara in the second narrow medium line minalan. We know Balmum is the avodas apostle. Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, the Amar Akra says the apostle the Chein Emar Hinni Noisin Layis Brisi Shalom Ukshu Shalom V'Lokshu Chaser V'Shalom with a vav. It says Amar Nachman vav. The Shalom Ketiyahu, the Vav of Shalom is severed, is cut off. Therefore, we could darshan it as if it says Shalem, and therefore that's the reason why we could darshan L'cheina Amar Nisin Noislo is Brisi Shalom. That when it's Shalom, when the kohen is whole, but like Shu Chaser, but when the kohen is going to be Chaser, when he's going to be a Balmum, then there would be no, then his avodah would indeed be possible. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.